Welcome to the Law School Insider, where we have conversations with students, lawyers, and employers.
Succeeding in law school is something that you must prepare for, not only before you begin, but throughout your law school journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I will draw from my over 20 years of experience in the college admission field, as well as bring forth the experiences of others as we delve deeper into the issues. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Law School Insider. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I'm so excited to be able to have you back again this week. This week, I am really excited because I have Professor and Dean David Tarrien from Western Michigan University Cooley Law School with us today. And today we're going to be talking about something that some of you may have experienced in the past. And if you haven't experienced it in the past, you may experience it as you're going through law school. And that's talking about test anxiety. We've talked a little bit about law school exams and how they can be a bit stressful. We've talked about stress in the past as well, but we haven't really talked about how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that test anxiety and how do you work through that? And how do you avoid possible disasters, possible concerns about the exams that you may have in your future? And Professor Tarrien works with students all the time on this. So I'm really excited to be able to have him on the show and to have him share some of his thoughts on this. So, Professor Tarrien, thanks so much for joining us this week.
No, you're very welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Now, Professor Tarrien, I want to talk to you a little bit about the tests and the law school exams in themselves, because I know that they can be a bit strenuous because for many law school students in law schools, students are basically putting most of their grades on the end of a long term. And thus, the stress becomes heightened and the anxiety becomes heightened. And I know you deal with students all the time on this. And as you're working with students on battling this and working through these issues, what are some of the strategies that you work with these students on to help them to manage this and to be able to work through this?
Sure. Optimally, the best strategy is to make it a full term or semester long strategy. You start thinking about the final exams your first day of the term or semester. And what I mean by that is essentially you have an intentionality, a sense of purpose, and a plan that is step-oriented, process-oriented, and has specific benchmarks and mini goals along the way, so that you can meet the big goal of high performance on the final exams with success. So I talk with students a lot at the beginning of the semester about the best way to deal with anxiety is to do just that. The anxiety largely comes from an overall feeling that you as an individual are not in control of what is going on around you. And for folks who have test anxiety, that's exactly what the problem is. They don't feel in control of the material or, in terms of law school, how to solve the problems that they're going to face on the exam. And that loss of control will have a depressing effect on their performance. The first place is to start taking control is to be very deliberate about setting out a study schedule from the very beginning of the semester. I suggest to students that they, in the first week, really actually before that, during the break between semesters, they set up a schedule for the next semester and set up a specific time to study specific topics each day and have mini goals within those study sessions, meet those goals, and then the process of building the knowledge and the skill set to be able to solve the problems becomes something that is done over the course of time. It's done incrementally. And if it's done incrementally, it will build to a point where they will be able to succeed on an exam. That old adage, Rome was not built in a day, is definitely true for law school. So first piece of advice, be incremental and be intentional about your schedule.
Great advice. And I think that I've seen that many times with students in the past, that they think that the old study habits that they had in the past will continue for them while they get into law school. And that's not always true because law school is very different. Now, what are some of the
Right.
big changes that people tend to have to go through as they are having to change the study habits for themselves and even change the habits for test taking from undergraduate to law school?
The main difference is the fact that when you go to law school or various other professional schools, frankly, is that professional schools are designed to help people learn to solve other people's problems by and large. So it's the problem-solving part of professional school and law school specifically that is the new skill. Because other educational experiences from grade school through secondary education to college is largely about learning a body of knowledge and being able to show that you have learned that knowledge by essentially answering questions about it on a test. That's the undergraduate experience. You consume a body of knowledge, and then you put it on a test and say, look, this is what I've learned. In law school, the body of knowledge that you have to learn, the law, is not going to be directly tested on any exam, whether law school exams or eventually the bar exam, and certainly not in practice. A client is never going to come in and say, for instance, what are the elements of the crime of assault and battery? They're going to say, listen, I'm in a bit of trouble. I need you to help me get out of trouble. So the body of knowledge on the exam is something that is basically just assumed that you know and can use as a tool set to help the problem. Okay? So that's really the big difference, is that learning the body of knowledge is really just the first step, and it is not directly tested at any point, which frankly can give some students, in fact a lot of students, some anxiety because they're not sure if they know what they know, right? So that's really the first big difference.
I think those are some big differences. Now, what are some strategies that people can do to start to make that fundamental mind shift for themselves as they move into their legal career, so that they can, one, start to move forward in their legal studies and be able to be better prepared for studying, but also better prepared for their exams?
The best way to obtain a new skill set is to take a successfully completed version of it and sort of deconstruct it. I call this, when I talk with students, a performance-based outlining. So I'll sit down with a student and we will take some old exams in whatever class that student is participating in, and we will start to deconstruct the question and the model answers to that question and look at the parts. A successful law school exam answer involves identifying the appropriate law to use, identifying the fact that is relevant to that piece of law, and then being able to explain or argue or reason what the connection is between the law and the facts. Okay, so we take a look and model exam answer. We look for the law, we look for the facts, and we look for the reasoning and deconstruct it. And after we do that, then we go to a class session that they had probably the week that I'm meeting with them, and we take the law and attach it to the class that they just had and say, look, this is how you're going to solve the problem that you learned in this class on a test. So, as I said, it's sort of a performance-based study process, and that's really effective at taking control of the information because you're figuring out for yourself the process about, okay, so this is why I'm learning this, and this is how it is effectively applied. And then you go to another question and see if you can actually use what you just deconstructed.
Well, I appreciate that as well. Now, what about for those students that they get through those exams, and let's say that they have a disaster in that exam. It does not work out. They fail a class or they get a very poor grade, and they think that it is the end of their legal career. It isn't the end, but they feel that it is the end. Now, how do you start to rebuild from that and start to reframe for yourself so that you can move forward from failure toward finding what you need to do in the future?
The first thing that the student has to convince him or herself of is that an individual failure only becomes a long-lasting failure if you let it define your experiences in a negative way. So if there's poor exam performance, you have permission to do some self-pity for a very short amount of time, maybe a couple of hours, and then you start being proactive. You get a hold of your exam book and you go to the professor or an academic support person or even other trusted students that have been successful, and you deconstruct and try to identify where the skill failure was. Because if you can identify where the failure was, then you can focus on it and work to develop the skills so that it's a one-time event. And failure by itself is very important. We learn a lot from our failings. As long as you take them, as I said, and deconstruct them and figure out what happened, then you probably won't repeat that failure. So, like the old Chumbawamba song, you get knocked down, get up again, dust yourself off, and continue to move forward. And then you win, ultimately.
Now I have that song running through my head. So I appreciate
It is catchy. It is a catchy song.
It is a catchy song. It is also such a great song in this scenario, because I think that in law school you definitely will get knocked down, because no one has all the answers and no one is going to be always right, because the law is not black and white, it's very gray, and there is not always a clear right answer. So you have to know there are going to be times where you're not going to have the right answer. You have to learn from that, pick yourself up, as you said, and be able to just keep moving forward. And so everyone, take a listen to that song. Put it in your Spotify list or whatever list or whatever way that you listen to music, and every once in a while put it on, and it may inspire you to get back up and keep moving forward as well.
Yeah, because if you can't develop some tough skin in law school and the ability to analyze both your failings and your successes, you're not going to be able to succeed in the practice of law, because the practice of law is all about running up against brick walls and both winning and losing cases. And you've got to be able to take the losses and make something positive out of them, or you fall by the wayside.
I truly appreciate you sharing that, and for you being on the show today. And I hope that we can have you back on again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that was another great guest this week on the Law School Insider. If you have an interest in being a guest on the show, drop me an email at lawschoolinsider@Cooley, COOLEY.edu. And thank you all for listening today, and remember, you have the ability and right to take control of your law school's success. I hope you'll continue listening, creating a plan for success that will prepare you to achieve the dreams that you have set for yourself. Talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. You're on your way to being a law school insider. Please subscribe to stay connected and come back again next time as we speak to more students, lawyers, and employers.